Thanksgiving was supposed to be a quiet celebration. Just me and my son, sharing a meal in my small home like we used to before his life, became a whirlwind of success and travel. But nothing about that day went the way I expected. "So, Mom," my son Ethan said, taking a bite of turkey, "how are you liking the lake house I gifted you 2 years ago?" I froze, the fork slipping from my hand. "What lake house?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ethan's smile faltered, his eyes flicking toward his wife Camille, who was sitting beside him in perfect silence. "The house on Clearwater Lake," he said slowly, almost like he didn't believe I was asking. "I had it transferred to your name on your birthday. You never got it?" I shook my head, heart pounding in my chest. Camille stood up suddenly, mumbling something about needing to make a phone call, her designer heels clicking across my worn linoleum floor. I barely registered her departure. My mind was spinning. I'd been living paycheck to paycheck, working late-night janitorial shifts just to afford my blood pressure medication, often skipping meals to make ends meet. A lake house? I would have remembered something like that. Ethan pulled out his phone, tapping through emails. "I'll show you the paperwork. My assistant handled everything, even set up monthly deposits for maintenance costs. You've been getting $1,500 a month, right?" My legs buckled. "No, Ethan, I haven't seen a cent. I've been rationing my pills, wearing the same coat through 2 winters." His face went pale. "That's not possible. I have transaction records. The deed was transferred. The payments were set up. Something's not right." I nodded slowly. "Exactly. Something isn't right." From the kitchen, Camille's voice was muffled but sharp. I couldn't make out the words, but her tone made my stomach twist. Ethan was already scrolling frantically, searching for confirmation that everything he believed to be true was a lie. "I need to see the deed," I said quietly. "I need to know what happened to that house." Ethan nodded, panic rising behind his composed businessman mask. "We're going to figure this out." When Camille returned, her face was composed but flushed. She claimed everything was a misunderstanding, blamed the bank, the mail, a clerical error. But I saw it in her eyes, the guilt. The kind of guilt you can't mask with polite smiles and careful lipstick. Ethan asked her, "Did you ever speak to my assistant about the house paperwork?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Opened again. Nothing. Her silence told me more than any confession ever could. I knew, in that moment, that Camille had taken something that was meant for me, something that could have changed my life. Camille's silence lingered like smoke in the room, curling into every corner of my thoughts. Ethan looked at her, eyes narrowing, as pieces began to fall into place. "Camille," he said slowly, "you coordinated with my assistant back then. You helped with the paperwork, the account details, didn't you?" She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous tick I hadn't noticed until that moment. "It was so long ago," she murmured. "I don't remember every detail. But I did. I remembered every long night scrubbing floors, every skipped meal, every doctor's appointment I canceled because I couldn't afford the copay." Ethan pulled out his phone again, dialing on speaker. "Rebecca?" "It's Ethan. Can you check the transfer records for the Clearwater Lake property? The deed was supposed to go to my mom 2 years ago. Also, the bank account linked to the monthly payments I need to confirm the details." "Of course," came Rebecca's voice, professional and clear. "One moment. Yes, the deed was transferred to Mrs. Elaine Brooks on November 12th, 2 years ago. And the monthly payments, $1,500 on the first of each month, have been deposited regularly into the account, ending in 4,823. My heart sank. "That's not my account," I said immediately. "Mine ends in 9,034. Ethan's head snapped toward Camille. "Rebecca, who gave you that account number?" There was a pause. "Your wife." Camille called and said your mother's banking information had changed. She provided the new routing and account numbers herself. Ethan's face went blank, more terrifying than any outburst of anger. Camille opened her mouth, but the words came out broken and useless. "Two can explain. Start," Ethan said flatly. Because right now it sounds like you stole from my mother. Camille's eyes welled up. I didn't steal. I borrowed. My parents were losing their house, and my dad's health was declining. I just needed to help them. I thought I could replace it all before anyone noticed. I stared at her, disbelief rooted deep in my bones. You let me live in poverty while your parents sat in a house meant for me? It wasn't like that, she cried. But even she didn't believe it. Ethan stepped back, as if seeing her for the first time. Where's the deed now? Where did it get mailed? Rebecca's voice returned through the speaker. It was sent to 750, 2 Elmwood Avenue, apartment 3C. I've never lived there, I said, my voice icy. Camille, Ethan said slowly. Is that address familiar? Her silence was damning. Rebecca continued, unaware of the tension in the room. All funds were transferred to the account in Elaine's name, but the signature on the paperwork didn't match previous documents we had on file. Ethan ended the call. His hands trembled as he looked at me. Mom, she forged your signature. I couldn't breathe. For 2 years I had been surviving. Just surviving while the people who were supposed to be family lived off money that was meant to ease my pain. Camille had sat at my table, eaten my food, smiled across from me, and pretended I mattered. But it had all been a lie. The room felt smaller, colder, like the air itself knew something had broken beyond repair. Camille stood near the doorway, arms wrapped tightly around herself as if shielding against a truth she could no longer avoid. Ethan paced the floor, fingers gripping his hair as he tried to make sense of something senseless. You knew, he said, voice tight. You knew my mom was struggling. You let me think everything was fine. Every time I brought her up, you said you'd spoken to her, that she was doing well. Camille turned to him, tears streaking her carefully done makeup. I was afraid, she said. Afraid that, if you worried too much, you'd pull away from me, focus more on her. I just wanted to help my parents. Help your parents, I repeated, voice calm, but laced with steel. With the money my son thought he was giving to me, with the house that was supposed to be mine. You sat at my table, looked me in the eye, listened to me talk about working extra shifts, about skipping meals to afford my meds, and you said nothing. Ethan stopped pacing. His voice dropped to a deadly quiet. You had access to my office. That's where I keep all our family records. My files, my notes. Did you take her personal documents? Camille didn't answer, but the way her eyes dropped to the floor told us everything. How did you open an account in my mother's name? Ethan pressed. Her social security number? Her date of birth? She gave the smallest nod. Just a few documents. I saw them in the filing cabinet. I thought I could fix it all before it got out of hand. My stomach turned. You didn't just steal money. You stole my identity. Only for the account, she whispered. It wasn't meant to hurt anyone. I stared at her, a woman I had fed, welcomed, trusted. For 2 years I'd believed my son was too busy to check on me, when in reality she had turned his care into theft. We're going to the bank, I said. I want to see the account. I want to see what you've done. Ethan nodded. Bring your ID. We're getting answers. The silence in the car ride to First National Bank was heavy. My hands trembled as I stepped into the marble lobby and handed the clerk my ID and social security card. Her face pinched in confusion as she pulled up the account. It was opened 2 years and 1 month ago, she said slowly. The address listed is 750, 2 Elmwood Avenue, apartment 3C. That's not my address, I said. I've lived at the same house for 10 years. She showed us the signature card, my name, written in a clumsy imitation of my handwriting. The E in Elaine was all wrong. This is fraud, the clerk said with concern. And identity theft? You need to file a police report immediately. But it wasn't over. Ethan pulled out a folder with payment records every amount he'd sent, thinking it was reaching me. There were monthly transfers, but also one-time payments. $400 when he thought I needed glasses, $800 for dental work, $0 as a holiday gift. All of it had gone to the fake account. How much? I asked. even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Ethan tapped the numbers into his calculator, then looked at me with wide, stunned eyes. $43,000, he said. Over 2 years. I sank into the chair dizzy. 43,000. That was more money than I'd seen in my entire adult life. Enough to cover my medication, fix my car, keep the heat running, and stop rationing food. Camille hadn't just stolen from Mesh, stolen years of peace, comfort, and the dignity I deserved. And now, she was going to face what she'd tried so hard to hide. We left the bank with a thick stack of printed documents, every line of ink confirming what my gut had known since Thanksgiving dinner. Camille had carefully, deliberately orchestrated a theft that went far beyond what we initially imagined. Ethan didn't say a word as he drove, but I could see the storm building behind his eyes. We pulled up in front of the rundown apartment complex, listed on the forged bank documents, 752 Elmwood Avenue, apartment 3C. The building looked abandoned. Faded paint, flickering signage, cracked concrete steps, a for rent sign hung crooked in the window. She probably used it to set up the fake account, Ethan muttered. Just long enough to have an address on file. I was quiet, but a new question had taken root in my mind, more chilling than all the others. Ethan, how did she even get all my personal information? My social security number, my birth date, old signatures, where would she get those? He hesitated, then answered with a mix of shame and rage. From the house, my home office. I keep our important family records in the filing cabinet. Birth certificates, medical files. She had access to everything. My heart broke in a new way. Camille hadn't just taken an opportunity, she had planned this. She had gone through my son's files, gathered my identity like it was a costume she could wear, and used it to rewrite my life in her favor. That night, we sat in my living room, surrounded by folders, printouts, and Ethan's laptop. It was the same space where Camille had once smiled politely over coffee, asking about my work schedule, while knowing exactly how much she'd stolen. Ethan looked exhausted, but determined. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, voice cracking. I trusted her completely. I never thought to double-check anything because she was the one who suggested it all. The payments, the Lakehouse, everything. His words cut deeper than he realized. "She suggested it?" I asked. "Yes," he nodded. "A few months after Dad passed, she said you were probably struggling and that it would mean a lot if I helped. She offered to talk to my assistant, Rebecca, and coordinate everything. She even researched the Lakehouse, told me you'd always wanted to live near the water. Said it would help you heal." I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath. Camille had taken my grief, my widowhood, and turned it into a tool. She pretended to care while she stole not only money but the connection between me and my son. "She played you," I whispered. "She played both of us." Ethan nodded slowly. "And I let her. I was so focused on the business, on not falling apart after Dad died. I thought she was helping. She wasn't," I said firmly. "She was building her own safety net using everything you gave to me." I looked around the room, this tiny, worn home that I'd worked so hard to hold on to. I thought about the quiet nights with no heat, the skipped meals, the headaches from rationed medication, all while Camille's parents lounged in my Lakehouse, enjoying the comfort bought with stolen money. "We need to call the lawyer," I said. "This isn't just theft. It's fraud, identity theft, forgery, and maybe more." Ethan nodded. "I'll handle it. But I want you to see every step of it." The next morning, after Ethan had left to gather more paperwork, I called in sick to work for the first time in years. My supervisor, Mrs. Callahan, sounded surprised, but I kept it simple family emergency. If only she knew. When Ethan returned, he brought more than just documents. He brought answers. Together we spread everything out across the dining table. Emails between Camille and his assistant, the forged signature on the deed, bank statements showing monthly transfers, even a falsified lease agreement for the fake address. It was all there. Camille had constructed an entire second identity for Mione that received money, owned a house, and sent polite thank you notes in my name, none of which I had ever seen. My hands trembled as I pointed to one detail after another. She forged this. She used that to open the account. Look here, this signature is close, but not mine. See that curve? I never write my E like that. Ethan took photos of every forgery, every transaction, and added them to a folder labeled simply, Evidence. He looked at me, his face drawn but determined. We're going to make this right. All of it. For the first time in years, I believed him. 2 days later, Ethan's lawyer, Mr. Calloway, called with news that stopped me in my tracks. I was mopping the lobby of the building where I'd cleaned for the past 11 years when I saw the missed call. I returned it on my lunch break, sitting outside on a cracked bench, with my back aching from hours of bending. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, his voice grim and measured. "We need to meet immediately. What we've uncovered goes far beyond the initial theft." Ethan picked me up after my shift, looking like he hadn't slept. The weight of everything that had happened was beginning to show in his eyes, not just as guilt, but as betrayal. His entire life with Camille, now under a microscope. We arrived at Mr. Calloway's office, where he greeted us with a thick manila folder filled with printed documents and photocopies. "What you're dealing with isn't just financial fraud. Camille's actions span multiple criminal categories. She didn't just steal your identity to open one account, she opened 3 separate bank accounts at different institutions under your name, forged your signature on at least 4 financial documents, and filed false tax returns on your behalf." I blinked, struggling to process his words. "Tax returns?" "Yes," he said, flipping open a page. "She claimed you as a dependent on their joint filings, then submitted separate returns under your name to collect fraudulent refunds. According to the IRS, you received tens of thousands in untaxed income and never reported it." "But I never received anything," I whispered. "I file simple taxes every year. I use the same tax office I've used for a decade." "I know, but the IRS doesn't," Mr. Calloway replied. "They've been sending audit notices to the fake Elmwood Avenue address for over a year. You're currently flagged for possible tax evasion." My stomach dropped. "I could be prosecuted?" "It's unlikely once we present the evidence," he assured me. "But it won't be easy. Camille covered her tracks well enough to fool the government. It'll take time and legal intervention to clear your name." Ethan sat perfectly still, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. "How much?" he asked finally. "How much did she take?" Mr. Calloway flipped through the financial records. "Including the original 43-0, the fraudulent tax refunds, unauthorized credit card charges, and a personal loan she took in Elaine's name, we estimate the total to be around 78-0. My breath caught in my throat. $78,000. I made less than a quarter of that in a year. Ethan's voice was low, seething. "She stole 4 years of my mother's life. And the house? Technically, the property is still in your mother's name," Mr. Calloway explained. "Because of the forged deed, she is the legal owner. However, Camille's family has been living there and making modifications with funds obtained through fraud, which complicates things. We'll need to move quickly to reclaim it." I thought of the Lakehouse. I'd never seen the one Ethan bought out of love and hope, the one Camille gave to her parents like a stolen gift. I'd spent 2 years alone in a cold, aging rental, while another family enjoyed sunsets by the water in my name. "What happens next?" I asked, still stunned. "We file criminal charges," Mr. Calloway said. "We involve law enforcement, notify the IRS, and freeze all accounts associated with your stolen identity. Camille may be charged with fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and obstruction. This isn't a civil issue anymore, it's a felony case." I looked down at the folder in my lap, at the numbers and dates and signatures that weren't mine. What about her family? They'll be required to vacate the house. If they can prove they didn't know the money was stolen, they may avoid prosecution, but they can't keep what was purchased illegally. Ethan stood and walked to the window, staring out in silence. "Where is she now?" Still at the Lakehouse, Mr. Calloway answered. Our investigators saw her there yesterday. She hasn't left since she stormed out of your home. Of course she hasn't, Ethan muttered. She ran straight to the people who've been living off the money she stole from my mom. That afternoon, we drove to Clearwater Lake. I had never seen the house Ethan had given Memmy House until then. As we turned onto the long private drive, the trees parted to reveal a stunning lakeside home. Wide glass windows reflecting the water, manicured gardens wrapped around the porch like a ribbon. It was beautiful. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of. And it was mine. Camille's father opened the door, going pale when he saw me. We were expecting you, he said quietly. Camille appeared behind him, wearing an old sweatshirt and no makeup, her face pale and puffy. Elaine, she said, her voice cracking. I'm so sorry. I looked her dead in the eyes, searching for even a flicker of remorse that wasn't tangled in fear. Are you sorry you did it? I asked coldly. Or just sorry you got caught? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She started to cry, but this time I didn't feel sympathy, not even anger, only the cold, hollow space where trust had once lived. Camille stood there crying, her shoulders hunched like a child caught stealing from a cookie jar. But the damage she'd done wasn't childish, it was criminal. Behind her, the lake sparkled in the afternoon sun, a cruel contrast to the weight in my chest. It didn't start like this, she whispered. It was just that first payment. My parents were losing their house. I thought I'd borrow a little, just once. But you never noticed. So you kept going. Ethan finished, his voice like stone. You kept stealing. You didn't just take money, Camille. You took my mother's name. You made her into a criminal on paper, while your family sat here sipping wine on her porch. Camille's mother appeared in the doorway, clearly shaken. We didn't know, she said quickly, wringing her hands. We thought David Ethan had given the house to Victoria Camille. She told us it was a gift. I looked at the older woman and saw something I hadn't seen in Camille. Genuine horror. She'd been lied to, too. Camille's deception ran so deep, she'd manipulated her own family into complicity. The IRS is after me, I said quietly, looking at Camille. They think I'm a fraud. They think I've been hiding income. They think I'm a criminal because of you. Her mother gasped, a hand to her mouth. Camille looked ready to collapse, and maybe part of her wanted to, but the rest of her was still clinging to the illusion that an apology could erase what she'd done. You can't stay here, Ethan said to Camille's parents. This house was purchased with stolen funds. The deed is in my mother's name. You need to leave. Of course, her father said immediately, nodding. We'll be out within the week. We had no idea. I believed him. Not because I trusted easily anymore, but because his eyes looked like mine had a few days ago, confused, ashamed, betrayed. Mr. Calloway arrived an hour later, carrying a thick folder of legal papers. Camille, he said, you need to cooperate. Law enforcement has already been notified. It's in your best interest to turn yourself in voluntarily. Camille looked at Ethan, desperation leaking from every pore. Please don't let them arrest me. I'll pay it all back. I'll get a job. I'll make it right. Ethan didn't flinch. With what skills? He asked. You've never worked a day in your life. You've never earned anything. You've only taken. Camille fell to her knees, sobbing into her hands. I turned away. I didn't want to see her tears anymore. I didn't want to wonder if she was truly sorry, or just sorry she lost. As we drove away, I looked back one last time at the house that was supposed to be my home. Soon it would be, but it no longer felt like a gift. It felt like evidence, not of love, but of betrayal. Mom, Ethan said as we turned onto the main road, I swear to you, I'm going to make sure you never have to worry again. I'm going to fix this. I placed my hand gently on his. You were taking care of me all along, sweetheart. She just made sure I never knew it. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, depositions, and restitution filings. Camille was arrested the following morning. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. She simply climbed into the back of the police car in the same sweatshirt she'd been wearing when we saw her at the lake. Ethan filed for divorce that same afternoon. He didn't tell her. He didn't need to. The silence said enough. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Camille signed everything without contest. She had no choice. By then, the state had already frozen all accounts linked to the fraud. All funds were being redirected to restitution. The house, officially and legally, belonged to me. But despite the court victories, despite the slow recovery of my financial life, what lingered wasn't satisfaction, it was exhaustion. Camille's betrayal had shaken something fundamental in me. She had taken my name and used it like a mask, smiling at Ethan, smiling at me, while draining away my dignity, my comfort, and my connection to my own son. I hadn't just lost money. I had lost 2 years of peace. But I also knew something else now. She hadn't won. She had delayed my peace, not destroyed it. And every step forward from here, every meal I didn't skip, every prescription I could now fill, every morning waking up in the house that should have always been mine was proof that I was still standing. Camille had tried to erase me, but I was here. I was back. And this time, I knew exactly what was mine. Moving into the Lakehouse should have felt like a triumph, but instead, it felt like stepping into someone else's life, a life that had been worn by imposters. The furniture was tasteful, the floors immaculate, the kitchen stocked with appliances I never would have bought for myself, but every item I touched carried the weight of betrayal. The porch swing, where Camille's mother had likely sipped morning coffee, the fireplace, where her father might have warmed his feet, all of it bought with money meant to make my final years easier. Ethan helped me carry boxes from my tiny rental. There wasn't much, just a few framed photos, a stack of secondhand books, clothes worn thin from years of washing. "We can change anything," he said as he set a lamp down in the foyer. "Furniture, paint, whatever makes it feel like home." I nodded, but my voice caught. "It's not the curtains or the paint, Ethan. It's the history. It feels like their life, not mine." "Then we'll rewrite it," he said gently. Together. That night, I stood in the master bedroom and stared at the bed. It was too big, too unfamiliar. But I lay down anyway, and for the first time in years, the sheets weren't scratchy, the mattress didn't creak, and I didn't fall asleep worrying whether I'd have enough for groceries the next week. Still, I didn't feel peace. I felt haunted. The next morning, I sat on the screened porch with a cup of tea and watched the sunrise turn the lake to gold. The view was breathtaking, and for the first time since all this began, I felt the faintest whisper of hope. Maybe this place could become mine after all. Ethan arrived at 9 a.m. Sharp with a bag from the local bakery. "Cinnamon rolls," he grinned. "Still your favorite?" I smiled. "They are." We sat at the kitchen table, mine. No one ate quietly. "Any word on the appeal?" I asked. "Camille's public defender filed something," he said. "But my lawyer says it's just a formality. There's too much evidence. She pled guilty to everything. She'll serve her sentence. 18 months. It had seemed like a slap on the wrist at first, but as time passed, I realized something surprising. I didn't need her to suffer. I just needed her gone. "How do you feel about it?" Ethan asked. I thought for a long moment. "Relieved," I said. "Not because she's in prison, but because the pretending is over. The lies, the false smiles. I know where I stand now. I'd spent so long believing I was forgotten, irrelevant. But Camille's crimes had forced everything into the light. Ethan had seen me again, not just as an obligation, but as a person. Her therapist called it entitlement syndrome," Ethan said after a pause. Apparently, she really believed she deserved what she took. That life owed her. I shook my head. "We've all had hard lives. That doesn't give us the right to steal from others." "You never thought about doing something like that?" he asked softly. "When you were struggling?" "Never," I answered without hesitation. "I went without so you didn't have to. That's what parents do." He looked down, ashamed. I should have noticed. I should have asked more questions. She fooled us both, I said, but she doesn't get to keep fooling anyone else. I spent the next week reclaiming the house one piece at a time. I replaced the bedding, took down Camille's mother's framed artwork and hung up a photo of my late husband. I bought a bird feeder and planted herbs near the kitchen window. Slowly, the house stopped feeling like a crime scene and started becoming mine. But the outside world wasn't as easy to mend. News of Camille's arrest spread quickly. In a small town like ours, people talked. Some were kind, offering casseroles and quiet sympathy. Others made comments that stung. "Well, at least you ended up with a beautiful house," one woman said, with a wink at the grocery store. I wanted to scream. As if the suffering had been a fair trade. As if the humiliation, the hunger, the shame had been worth a lake view. But I didn't say anything. I just smiled tightly and walked away. Healing isn't loud. It's slow, quiet, messy. It's unlearning the belief that you don't matter. It's choosing, every morning, to believe that you deserve comfort, safety, joy. That you deserve to be seen. Spring arrived slowly, melting the last frost from the edges of the lake and coaxing green shoots from the thawing ground. I found myself developing routines, real ones. Morning coffee on the porch, reading in the afternoons, cooking meals that weren't just about survival but about taste and comfort. Ethan came by every weekend, and sometimes more often, always carrying something thoughtful: a new kitchen towel, a potted plant, pastries from the bakery. He'd changed. Not in dramatic ways, but in the ways that matter. He no longer spoke distractedly, checking his phone during conversations. He looked me in the eye. He listened. One morning, as we were organizing the pantry, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "There's something I wanted to tell you," he said. "I've been seeing someone. Her name's Rachel. We met at a tech conference." I waited. Heart paused. "She's a forensic accountant," he added with a small, sheepish smile. "Of course she is," I said, unable to stop the chuckle that escaped. "You'll never be scammed again." He laughed too, and something about that shared moment felt like the first genuine lightness between us in a long time. "She knows the whole story," he said. "Camille, the fraud, everything." I told her because I didn't want to hide anything, and she said, "She respects you. Thinks you're the strongest woman she's never met." "That's a good start," I said, "but I'll make my own judgment when I meet her." He looked relieved. "I'd like that." Later that afternoon, I wandered the garden paths that Camille's parents had once walked daily. I'd pulled out some of the plants they left behind and replaced them with my own marigolds, lavender, sweet basil. A neighbor had brought me tomato starters, and I'd planted those too. For the first time in decades, I was building something that no one could take away from me. I called Mrs. Callahan, my old supervisor at the cleaning company, just before dinner time. "Elaine," she said, surprised. "How are you doing? Are you coming back next week?" "No," I said, softly but firmly. "I wanted to let you know that I'm retiring." The silence on the line stretched for a beat. "Are you sure?" she asked. "You've been with us forever." "I'm sure. I'm finally able to stop. It's time I lived for myself." Saying the words out loud felt like breaking free of chains I didn't even know I was still wearing. I had worked for other people my entire life. Scrubbed their floors, wiped their windows, hid my own hunger behind a smile. And now, because the truth had finally been dragged into the light, I could stop. That night, I cooked myself a real dinner roast chicken, with rosemary from my garden, fresh salad, warm bread from the bakery Ethan always visited. I poured a small glass of wine and sat at the table by the window, where I could watch the lake shimmer under the fading sun. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. "Rachel wants to know if you like Italian food. She's thinking of cooking for you next weekend." I smiled as I typed back, "Tell her I love it, but she doesn't need to impress me. If she makes you happy, that's enough." I set the phone down and looked around the house, the walls painted in calming tones, the shelves now filled with my books, my framed photos, my life. Camille had tried to steal my future, But all she'd done was delay it. What she never understood was that I'd already lived through worse. Poverty, grief, widowhood, exhaustion. Those things had made me resilient, stronger than she ever imagined. Now, finally, I had space to breathe, and the peace to start again. The day Rachel came to dinner, the house felt more like mine than it ever had. The air carried the scent of lemon and thyme, and sunlight spilled across the dining room table I'd set with simple plates, cloth napkins, and a candle I'd been saving for a special occasion. This was it. Not a grand celebration, not a party, just a quiet evening with my son and the woman he might one day love. That was enough. When she walked in, I saw right away what Ethan saw in her. Rachel was confident, kind, and observant. She noticed the herb garden through the window, complimented my book collection without sounding rehearsed, and when she spoke to me, she did it with respect, not pity. After dinner, we sat out on the porch, watching the lake catch the last orange light of the setting sun. Rachel leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I know you don't need to hear this from me," she said, "but I think what Camille did to you was monstrous. And what you did in response, how you held your dignity, how you rebuilt it's inspiring. I didn't know what to say, so I smiled. A real one." I slept deeply that night. No nightmares, no jolts of panic, just the sound of the lake lapping gently at the shore and the breeze brushing through the trees. I woke up and made coffee. I opened the curtains. I felt calm. And more importantly, I felt present. Months passed. The calls from lawyers stopped. The questions from the IRS ended. My accounts stabilized. The deed was in my name again. The taxes were filed correctly, and Camille's name, once a weight around my neck, no longer carried power over me. She wrote once from prison, a letter filled with half regrets and no real apology. I didn't respond, not out of spite, but because I had nothing left to give her. She had taken years from me. She wouldn't get another moment. One afternoon, I drove into town and treated myself to a haircut and a new coat. The stylist asked what the occasion was. I said, "Life. Just life." She smiled and said it suited me. I stopped by the bakery afterward, picked up cinnamon rolls, and dropped one off at the nursing home for an old friend I hadn't seen in a while. Giving without losing, that's what healing looked like for me now. That night, I sat by the fireplace and started writing a letter, not to Camille, not to Ethan, but to myself. A thank you note. I thanked myself for not giving up, for enduring humiliation and hunger, for holding on to my values when no one was looking. I thanked myself for surviving, and for finally learning that survival wasn't the same as living. Living is planting tomatoes in spring, laughing with your grown son over coffee, letting your body rest without guilt, opening the windows wide, singing while you cook, saying no when something doesn't feel right, and remembering that love, the kind that truly matters, doesn't hide behind manipulation or theft. It shows up with flowers on a rainy day and cinnamon rolls on a quiet Sunday morning. I'm not rich. I don't need to be. I'm home, and I'm finally free. Let me know in the comments what you thought of my story. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know.